The day Elara Voss burned the mating contract on the altar steps, she thought she was sacrificing a crown for love. She never imagined the flames would become her brother's death sentence. The contract had taken 6 months to negotiate. 3 kingdoms had built their future around it. One signature would have prevented war. One signature would have made the Lycan King the most powerful ruler on the continent. Instead, Elara set the parchment on fire before thousands of witnesses, and while the kingdom watched in horror, the Lycan King chose her, not the alliance, not the throne, not the political bride waiting at the altar, her. For a single glorious moment, it felt like a fairy tale. Then the royal guards arrested her brother. 3 months later, he stood on an execution platform, accused of treason, condemned to die, and before the truth was finally revealed, a brother would make a sacrifice so great that an entire kingdom would remember his name long after. Kings and queens were forgotten. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and leave a comment telling us where you're watching from. Now tell us this: if choosing the person you loved meant risking the life of someone you loved even more, what would you do? Would you choose your heart or your family? Long before Elara Voss stood on the altar steps with a burning contract in her hands, before the Lycan King chose her, before an entire kingdom, before her brother was sentenced to die, there was a small stone cottage at the edge of Blackthorn Village, and inside that cottage lived 2 children who had nothing except each other. Elara was 8, Caleb was 12. Their parents had died during a winter fever that swept through the northern territories. The village healer had tried everything: medicine, prayer, moon-blessed herbs. None of it worked. Within a week, both parents were gone. Most people expected the children to be separated. That was how things usually happened. Orphans became burdens. Burdens became responsibilities. Responsibilities were divided. But Caleb refused. The boy stood in front of every village elder and made a promise. "I'll take care of her." The adults laughed. He was 12, skinny, poor, barely old enough to feed himself. But Caleb never changed his answer. Every time someone offered to send Elara elsewhere, every time someone suggested a foster family, every time someone said it would be easier, he answered the same way: "I'll take care of her." And somehow, he did. The years that followed were not easy. Caleb worked every job available: hunting, fishing, woodcutting, fence repairs, roof repairs, anything that paid, anything that kept food on the table. While other boys his age played games and chased girls through the village streets, Caleb worked. Because Elara needed shoes, Elara needed books, Elara needed dinner, and Caleb had decided long ago that her needs came before his own. By the time Elara turned 24, the siblings had become known throughout Blackthorn Village, not because they were powerful, not because they were wealthy, because they were inseparable. Everyone knew Caleb Voss, the dependable ranger, the man who always volunteered when danger appeared, the man who spent every spare coin making sure his sister had opportunities he never did. And everyone knew Elara the healer, the woman with storm-gray eyes, the woman who spent her days helping the sick and injured, the woman who somehow remained kind despite a life that had given her every reason not to be. Their cottage remained small, simple, modest, but it was home, and for a long time, that was enough, until the king arrived. Not just any king, the Lycan King, Thorn Blackwind, ruler of the Blackwind Kingdom, commander of the largest army on the continent, the wolf every neighboring kingdom feared. His arrival transformed Blackthorn overnight. Banners appeared, roads were cleaned, merchants flooded the village. Nobles arrived from distant territories. Rumors spread faster than wildfire. The Lycan King was searching for a bride, not for love, for politics. The kingdom stood on the edge of conflict. 3 neighboring territories threatened war. An alliance marriage would strengthen Blackwind's position. And Lady Victoria Ashfall had already been selected: beautiful, powerful, noble, everything a queen should be. The formal mating contract would be signed during the upcoming Moon Festival. Thousands would attend, including the king himself. Most villagers viewed the event as entertainment, a royal spectacle, something exciting. Elara paid little attention. Royal politics had nothing to do with her, or so she believed. The morning everything changed began like every other morning. Elara woke before sunrise, prepared medicinal supplies, collected herbs from the forest, visited elderly patients throughout the village. By midday, she was exhausted and still working. A young boy had fallen from a horse. A farmer had injured his hand. An elderly woman needed treatment for a persistent cough. Elara handled every case patiently, because that was who she was. She helped people, not because she expected rewards, because someone needed to. By evening, the Moon Festival preparations filled the entire village. Music drifted through the streets. Lanterns illuminated every building. Excitement filled the air. Even Caleb seemed unusually interested. Elara noticed immediately. "You've been smiling all day!" Her brother looked offended. "I smino." She laughed. "You tolerate happiness." Caleb shook his head, then handed her a folded invitation. Her smile faded. Royal seal, Blackwind Palace, official, important, dangerous. "Why do we have this?" Caleb looked away, which immediately made her suspicious. "What did you do?" "I volunteered." Elara groaned. "Caleb, the palace requested additional medical staff for the festival." "You volunteered me. You are the best healer in the village." "You volunteered me. It pays well." Elara stared at him. Caleb smiled, the rare genuine smile that always made it impossible to remain angry. Eventually she sighed. "You planned this. For weeks. You are impossible. I've been told that." The following afternoon, Elara entered Blackwind Palace for the first time. The structure dominated the landscape. Massive stone towers, ancient walls, silver banners. Everything about it radiated power. She suddenly felt very small. The palace staff escorted her toward the festival grounds. Hundreds of workers rushed everywhere. Preparations continued non-stop. Guards patrolled every entrance. Nobles arrived by the minute. The entire kingdom seemed concentrated inside one location. Elara focused on her duties, treat minor injuries, remain invisible, return home simple. At least that was the plan. Then she met him. The encounter happened by accident. A servant carrying wine tripped near the western courtyard. Several glass bottles shattered. One shard sliced deeply into the servant's hand. People panicked. The servant panicked. Blood poured onto the stone pathway. Elara reacted instantly. Years of experience took over. She dropped beside the injured man, applied pressure, wrapped the wound, calmed him down. Everything else disappeared. The crowd, the palace, the nobles, none of it mattered. Only the patient. Only the injury. Only the solution. "You have steady hands." The voice stopped her, deep, controlled, powerful. Elara looked up and forgot how to breathe. King Thorn Blackwind stood directly before her. The Lycan King, the ruler of Blackwind, the most feared wolf on the continent. He wore black military attire rather than ceremonial clothing. Dark silver embroidery lined the coat. The scar across his eyebrow gave him a dangerous appearance, but his eyes were what unsettled her, silver blue, intense, observant, watching her with complete focus. Not the servant, not the injury. Her, the entire courtyard had gone silent. Everyone watched, no one moved, because their king was staring at a village healer, and no one understood why. Neither did Elara. The strange sensation hit without warning. A powerful warmth spread through her chest. Her heartbeat accelerated. The world sharpened. Every sound became clearer, every scent stronger. Every detail brighter. The feeling terrified her, because deep inside, she already knew what it meant. Mate. The realization struck like lightning. Impossible, absolutely impossible. Kings did not find mates in village healers. Kings married nobles, queens, princesses. Not women from small cottages at the edge of nowhere, yet the bond continued growing stronger. The king's expression shifted, subtly, almost imperceptibly, but she saw it. Recognition. The same realization, the same impossible truth. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then a noblewoman approached. Lady Victoria Ashfall. Beautiful, elegant, perfect, everything Elara wasn't. Victoria slipped her arm through the king's. Possessive, confident, public. The spell shattered. Reality returned. The future queen smiled politely. "Your Majesty." The king never removed his gaze from Elara, not immediately. That fact disturbed Victoria. Elara noticed. Eventually, Thorn looked away. The moment passed, the bond remained, and Alara's life changed forever. Because later that night, the king would send for her, and by the end of the week, an entire kingdom would stand between them. The summons arrived just after midnight. Elara had barely returned home when someone knocked on the cottage door. 3 sharp knocks. Official, military. The kind of knock that carried authority. Caleb immediately stood. Every protective instinct he possessed activated at once. The ranger moved toward the door with the caution of a man who had spent years surviving dangerous situations. Elara followed. A royal guard stood outside. Black armor, silver wolf insignia, expression unreadable. "The king requests your presence." The words landed like a stone. Silence filled the cottage. Caleb's jaw tightened. Elara's stomach dropped. Because there was only one king. And there was only one reason he would send for her, the mate bond. The guard continued. A carriage is waiting. Elara exchanged a glance with her brother. Neither needed to speak. Both understood. Everything had changed. An hour later, she found herself inside Blackwind Palace once again. Only this time there were no crowds, no music, no celebrations. The palace felt entirely different at night, quieter, more dangerous. The guard led her through long corridors illuminated by silver lanterns. Eventually, they reached a private balcony overlooking the kingdom, and there he was, King Thorn Blackwind. Standing alone, the moonlight transformed him into something almost unreal, dark hair, broad shoulders, silver eyes reflecting the night sky. For several moments, neither spoke. The bond pulsed between them, stronger than before, more difficult to ignore. Finally, the king broke the silence. You felt it, not a question, a statement. Elara swallowed. Yes! The king nodded. His expression revealed nothing, yet somehow she sensed relief, as if he had feared she might deny it. The moon goddess has a strange sense of humor. The unexpected comment surprised her. A faint smile touched his lips. Of all the women in my kingdom, Elara crossed her arms. You sound disappointed. That earned a genuine reaction. One eyebrow lifted. Do I? Maybe a little. For the first time, she saw amusement appear in his eyes. The sight was unexpectedly dangerous, because it made him seem human. Not a king, not a legend, a man, and that felt far more threatening. The king studied her carefully, then asked the question she had been expecting. What do you know about mate bonds? Very little. Good. Elara frowned. The answer seemed strange. Thorn sighed. Most stories are nonsense. He moved toward the balcony railing. The poets describe fate. The priests describe destiny. The nobles describe romance. Another pause. Then, reality is more complicated. The honesty surprised her. You don't seem very romantic. No. A beat. I lead armies. Elara almost laughed. Almost. The king noticed. Something softened in his expression. Then it disappeared, just as quickly. I wanted to meet you without an audience. His voice became more serious. Before others become involved. Others, the word carried weight. Political weight, royal weight, dangerous weight. Elara already knew who he meant. Victoria Ashfall, the nobles, the council, the kingdom itself. Because a mate bond involving the king was not private. It never could be. You are supposed to marry Lady Victoria. The statement lingered. The king looked toward the distant lights below. Yes, you have a contract. Yes, the kingdom needs the alliance. Again, yes. The answer frustrated her. Because none of those things sounded temporary. None sounded negotiable. The king finally turned toward her, and yet, the words hung between them. The mate bond pulsed. Strong, unavoidable. Neither of them had asked for this. Neither of them had planned it. Yet here it was, real. The silence stretched, then footsteps interrupted. Heavy footsteps, purposeful footsteps. The king's expression changed instantly. The warmth vanished. The ruler returned. A woman entered the balcony. Victoria Ashfall. Even at midnight, she looked flawless. Elegant silver gown, perfect posture, confident smile. Then her eyes found Elara. The smile weakened. Only slightly, but enough. Your Majesty. Victoria approached. The king nodded politely. Nothing more. The noblewoman's attention shifted toward Elara, and for the first time, Elara experienced exactly what it felt like to stand between a powerful woman and something she wanted. The sensation was unpleasant. Very unpleasant. Victoria's smile returned. Polite, controlled, dangerous. I don't believe we've met properly. Elara immediately understood. This wasn't an introduction. It was an evaluation, a measurement, a warning. Elara Voss, Victoria Ashfall. Neither woman looked away. The tension became obvious. Even the king noticed. Unfortunately, the king also seemed unwilling to help, which irritated both women. Victoria finally broke eye contact, returning her attention to Thorn. The council meeting begins tomorrow. The reminder carried meaning, political meaning. The king understood, so it does. Victoria smiled, then looked directly at Elara again. There are important decisions ahead. The statement sounded innocent. It wasn't. Everyone knew it wasn't. Then she left. The moment she disappeared, the atmosphere changed. Elara released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The king noticed. She doesn't like me. No, the answer came immediately, which somehow made her laugh. The king looked mildly satisfied. That worried her, because she was starting to enjoy his company. And that was dangerous, very dangerous. The next morning proved exactly how dangerous. Rumors spread through Blackwind Palace faster than wildfire. A healer, a commoner, the king's mate. The story reached every corridor, every servant, every noble, every council member. By noon, the entire kingdom seemed aware, and by evening, the royal council demanded answers. Elara wasn't present for the meeting, but Caleb was, because he had arrived at the palace shortly after dawn. The moment he learned the truth, the protective older brother had no intention of remaining far away. Unfortunately, the palace introduced him to a world far more dangerous than forest predators: politics. The ranger stood near the training grounds waiting for Elara when someone approached. A young palace servant, nervous, afraid. The servant handed him a folded note, then immediately left. Caleb frowned, opened it, read, and felt cold, very cold. The message contained only one sentence. If your sister values your life, she will reject the king. No signature, no explanation, no warning. Just a threat. Direct, simple, terrifying. Caleb read it twice, then a third time. His expression hardened, because suddenly he understood something. The danger wasn't the mate bond. The danger was everyone who wanted it gone, and there were many, far too many. That evening, Elara found him standing outside their assigned guest quarters. The moment she saw his face, she knew something was wrong. Caleb. He handed her the note. She read it. Her blood ran cold. The threat felt real. Not because of the words, because of the timing. Someone already viewed her as a problem. Someone already viewed Caleb as leverage. The realization frightened her more than anything else. The king arrived moments later. One look at their expressions, one look at the note, and his entire demeanor changed. The paper crumpled in his hand. Silver eyes darkened. The temperature around him seemed to drop. "Who delivered this?" Caleb explained. The king listened silently, dangerously silently. Then he gave a single order. "Find the servant." The nearby guards immediately moved. No hesitation, no questions. Gone within seconds, the king looked toward Caleb, then toward Elara. His voice remained calm, but the anger underneath was unmistakable. "No one threatens people under my protection." Protection. The word should have been comforting. Instead, it felt like the beginning of something much larger. Something darker, because for the first time, Elara realized the mate bond wasn't the problem. The problem was what powerful people were willing to do because of it. And somewhere inside Blackwind Palace, someone had already decided her brother was the easiest target. The threat should have frightened Caleb. Instead, it made him angry, not for himself, for Elara, because his entire life had followed the same pattern. Someone bigger, someone stronger, someone more powerful, always trying to make her pay for things she never asked for. When they were children, it had been poverty. When they became adults, it had been responsibility. Now it was politics, different enemy, same result. His sister suffering. And Caleb Voss was getting tired of it. Very tired. The following morning, the royal guards reported back. The servant who delivered the note had vanished, completely. No witnesses, no trail, no explanation. It was as if the person had never existed. The report only worsened the king's mood. Elara noticed immediately. Thorn Blackwind rarely displayed emotion publicly. Most rulers learned to hide their feelings. The king was exceptionally good at it, but she was beginning to recognize the signs. The tighter jaw, the colder eyes, the dangerous silence. Someone had threatened his mate and failed to cover their tracks. The combination made him furious. Unfortunately, the council meeting arrived before he could investigate further. The royal council gathered inside the Hall of Crowns. The most powerful people in Blackwind Kingdom occupied the room: generals, nobles, advisors, bankers, every person capable of influencing the future of the kingdom, and nearly all of them shared the same concern. Elara. The king entered first. His presence immediately silenced the room. Moments later, Lady Victoria Ashfall entered, confident, elegant, prepared. The council expected an announcement. They received one. "The mating contract will not be signed." The statement exploded through the chamber. Arguments began instantly. Several nobles stood, others shouted. The king remained seated, watching, waiting, allowing the chaos to burn itself out. Eventually, Lord Malric Duskmore rose from his chair, the oldest council member, the most influential noble in the kingdom, and the most dangerous politician alive. Unlike the others, Malric remained calm, always calm. That alone made him frightening. "Your Majesty." His voice carried easily. "The alliance secures our eastern border." Silence spread. The room listened. The Ashfall family controls nearly 40% of our trade routes. Another pause. The contract protects the kingdom. The argument sounded reasonable. Because it was. That was the problem. The king understood. Everyone understood. The kingdom genuinely needed the alliance. Malric continued. Respectfully, Your Majesty. His eyes shifted briefly toward Victoria, then returned. A mate bond should not outweigh the survival of a nation. The room nodded. Not everyone. Enough. The king leaned back, expression unreadable. And if the nation depends entirely upon one marriage? No one answered. The king continued. Then perhaps our nation has larger problems. The room fell silent. Because that answer was difficult to challenge, yet the tension remained. The meeting ended without resolution, which suited Lord Malric perfectly. Because chaos benefited politicians. Outside the chamber, Victoria waited. The moment the king emerged, she approached. No audience, no council, just the two of them. And unfortunately, Elara happened to witness the conversation. She had not intended to. The palace corridor offered limited escape routes. Victoria spoke first. You've already made your decision. The king said nothing, which was answer enough. The noblewoman smiled sadly. Not angry, not bitter, just tired. You could have simply told me. Something about that sentence hit differently. Because for the first time, Elara saw the woman behind the politics. Victoria wasn't a villain. She wasn't cruel. She wasn't plotting. She was simply a woman whose future had been built around a promise, and that promise had disappeared. The king finally answered, You deserve honesty. Victoria laughed quietly. That sounds unpleasant. The king almost smiled. Almost. Victoria looked toward Elara. The healer immediately wished she were somewhere else, anywhere else. But the noblewoman surprised her. You love your brother. The sudden statement caught Elara off guard. Of course, Victoria nodded. Good. Confusion spread. Victoria's expression became serious. The people threatening you won't target the king. A pause. They'll target him. The warning landed heavily. Because Victoria wasn't guessing, she knew. The noblewoman looked toward the distant gardens. The powerful rarely attack what is protected. Another pause. They attack what isn't. Then she walked away, leaving Elara unsettled. Very unsettled, because deep down, she knew Victoria was right. That evening, Caleb left the palace. Only briefly, he wanted space, fresh air, distance from politics. The ranger preferred forests to royal halls. Trees made sense. People didn't. The palace guards allowed him through the outer gate. The nearby woodland wasn't far, a short walk, nothing dangerous, or so everyone believed. The attack happened quickly. 3 masked men, professional. Organized, not thieves, not random criminals. They emerged from the trees simultaneously. Caleb reacted instantly. Years of ranger training saved him. The first attacker lunged. Caleb dodged, countered, dropped the man. The second swung a blade. Caleb blocked, disarmed him. The third nearly succeeded. A knife flashed through the darkness. The blade sliced across Caleb's shoulder. Pain exploded. Blood followed. But Caleb kept fighting. Because surviving had become a habit. And because he had promised someone long ago, I'll take care of her. Eventually, palace guards arrived. The attackers fled, disappeared into the forest, leaving behind only blood. And questions, many questions. The king arrived minutes later, alongside Elara, the moment she saw the blood on her brother's shirt. Fear consumed her, pure fear, the kind she hadn't felt since childhood. Caleb, she dropped beside him immediately. Ignoring everyone else, the king, the guards. The nobles gathering nearby, none of them mattered, only her brother, only family. Caleb forced a smile. I'm fine. You were stabbed, a little. Elara looked ready to strangle him. The king watched quietly, and for the first time, he truly understood something. The mate bond connected him to Elara, but Caleb was the center of her world, not the king, not the kingdom, not fate, her brother. And anyone threatening Caleb wasn't merely attacking a relative. They were attacking the person Elara loved most. The realization changed everything. Later that night, while Caleb recovered inside the royal infirmary, the king summoned General Rowan Blackwind. The massive commander entered immediately. What happened? The king stood near the window, looking out over the kingdom. They escalated. The general nodded. He agreed. Threatening notes. Now assassination attempts. The pattern was obvious. Someone wanted the mate bond broken. Desperately, the king's voice became colder. Double security around Caleb. It will be done. Triple it. The general blinked. The king continued. No one approaches him without my approval. The order surprised even Rowan. Not because it was unreasonable, because of what it revealed. The king wasn't protecting Caleb. Not really. He was protecting Elara, because if something happened to her brother, the damage would be permanent. The general understood. Then another thought surfaced. A dangerous one, Your Majesty. The king turned. What? Rowan hesitated, then spoke. What if Caleb isn't the target? Silence. The possibility settled heavily between them. The general continued. What if someone wants him arrested? The room became still. The king frowned. Explain. Threats, the general paced slowly. Political pressure. Attempts to provoke a reaction. Another pause. If someone wanted Caleb dead, there are easier ways. The king's expression darkened. Because Rowan was right. Very right. The attack felt staged, calculated, purposeful, as if someone wanted Caleb pushed toward something, manipulated toward something. The king's instincts screamed. A trap. Somewhere ahead, a trap was waiting, and whoever created it wasn't finished, not even close. Meanwhile, inside the infirmary, Caleb couldn't sleep. The pain in his shoulder wasn't the problem. The problem sat inside his pocket, a folded piece of paper. One of the attackers had dropped it during the fight. A paper Caleb had secretly picked up before anyone noticed. A paper carrying a symbol. A black raven, and beneath it 3 words. He knows the truth. Caleb stared at the message again and again and again, because he had absolutely no idea what truth they were talking about. Yet somehow, a terrible feeling settled into his chest. The feeling that his life was about to become much more complicated. The message should not have mattered. 3 words. A black raven symbol. A scrap of paper dropped during a failed attack. Yet Caleb could not stop thinking about it. He knows the truth. The sentence repeated itself throughout the night. Again, 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 like a splinter beneath the skin. Because the message implied something impossible. Someone believed Caleb knew something. The problem was, he didn't, at least not intentionally. By dawn, his shoulder hurt less. His thoughts hurt more. The infirmary remained quiet. Most patients still slept. The kingdom outside continued preparing for the moon festival. Life moved forward, yet Caleb felt strangely trapped, as though unseen pieces were moving around him. Pieces he couldn't see. Pieces he didn't understand. A knock interrupted his thoughts. Elara entered carrying breakfast. The moment she saw him awake, relief flooded her face. That reaction alone made everything worth it. Always had. Caleb smiled. You look terrible. Elara rolled her eyes. You were stabbed, and somehow I am still the attractive sibling. That earned the response he wanted. A laugh, small, brief, real. The sound eased some of the fear inside him, because he knew something she didn't. Every attack, every threat, every whisper, they were beginning to wear her down, and Caleb hated it. He had spent 16 years protecting her from pain. Now the entire kingdom seemed determined to undo that work. The door opened again. King Thorn entered. Immediately the atmosphere changed. Not because he demanded attention, because powerful people always changed rooms simply by entering them. The king carried a folded document, his expression serious, which was rarely a good sign. Elara noticed immediately. What happened? The king handed the document to Caleb. The ranger unfolded it, read, then frowned. It was a list, names, dates, locations, nothing else. I don't understand. The king crossed his arms. Neither do I. Caleb looked again, then froze. One name stood out, his father's, his dead father's. Silence filled the room. Elara moved closer. The moment she saw the name, confusion appeared. What is this? The king answered. We found it in the quarters of one of the attackers. The room became very quiet, because Caleb's father had been dead for 16 years. And yet his name appeared alongside several others. Every person on the list shared something. They were all dead, every single one. The realization unsettled everyone, especially Caleb. The king continued. Someone is collecting information on people connected to your family. A pause. We need to know why. Neither sibling had an answer. Unfortunately, Lord Mark Duskmore did. Far across the palace, inside a private chamber hidden behind the council wing, the nobleman sat alone beside a fire. The flames danced across his sharp features. A servant approached, nervous, careful, the kind of nervous reserved for dangerous men. The attack failed, Malric nodded, not surprised, not disappointed, simply accepting information. And the message? The servant hesitated. The ranger found it. For the first time, Malric smiled. A very small smile, the kind that frightened people. Good. The servant frowned. Good? The attack failed. The target survived. How was that good? Malric seemed to read the confusion. People rarely search for answers until they believe a question exists. The servant remained silent, because he didn't understand, but he understood enough. Lord Malric had wanted Caleb to find the message. The attack wasn't the objective. The message was, and that realization was terrifying. Elsewhere, General Rowan continued his investigation. Unlike politicians, Rowan trusted evidence. Evidence was simpler. Evidence didn't lie. The general spent most of the afternoon reviewing reports from the attack. Guard routes, witness statements, security logs. Eventually, something caught his attention. One name, a stable worker. The man had reported seeing the attackers enter the forest, yet his statement contained an inconsistency. A small one, easy to miss. Rowan never missed details. The general immediately ordered the man brought in for questioning. By sunset, the stable worker was talking. A lot. Fear made people talk, and Rowan was very good at creating fear. The information he provided shocked everyone. The attackers weren't mercenaries. They weren't criminals. They worked for noble families. Specific noble families. Families connected to the royal council. Families loyal to Lord Malric. The discovery reached the king before midnight. Thorne listened carefully, expression unreadable. When Rowan finished, silence followed. Then came the obvious question. Can we prove it? The general sighed. No, of course not. People like Malric never left proof. Only shadows, only rumors, only other people holding the knife. The king looked toward the dark window. The situation worsened by the hour. Because now he knew. The threats, the attacks, the pressure, all roads led toward Malric, yet none could be proven, which meant the nobleman remained untouchable. For now, the following morning brought another surprise. An unexpected visitor arrived. Elder Lyra Moonseer, the oldest oracle in Blackwind Kingdom. The woman hadn't visited the palace in nearly 3 years, yet somehow she appeared without warning, without invitation, as though the universe itself had sent her, which, considering her reputation, might actually be true. Elara met her first. The elderly woman studied her quietly, violet eyes unusually bright, unusually knowing. Then she smiled. Oh, Elara blinked. Oh, Lyra nodded. This is worse than I expected. That was not comforting, not remotely. The elderly woman reached forward and touched Elara's wrist. The moment contact happened, her smile disappeared completely. The change frightened everyone, including the king. What is it? Lyra looked toward Caleb, standing several feet away, watching. Protective as always, then she sighed. The wrong sibling carries the danger. The room froze. No one spoke. The oracle continued. The kingdom believes the healer is the key. A pause. They are wrong. The words landed heavily. The king frowned. What do you mean? Lyra looked directly at Caleb, and for the first time, the ranger felt genuine fear, because the elderly woman wasn't looking at him. She was looking through him, as though seeing something hidden, something buried, something dangerous. Finally, she spoke. Someone spent years searching for this boy. Despite Caleb being 28. The oracle continued anyway. They searched quietly. They searched patiently. They searched because they feared what would happen if they failed. Silence then. And now they know where he is. The room felt colder, much colder. Elara immediately stepped closer to her brother. Instinct, protection, family. The king watched both of them, his thoughts already racing, because suddenly everything made sense. The threats, the attacks, the message, the list of names, the dead relatives. None of it centered around Elara. It centered around Caleb. The realization changed everything. Unfortunately, the worst revelation was still coming. Because later that night, while searching through old village records sent from Blackthorn, a palace archivist discovered something impossible, something hidden for nearly 3 decades, something capable of destroying kingdoms. The document contained only one sentence, yet that sentence would change Caleb's life forever. Because according to the official records, Caleb Voss should have died the day he was born. Lord Malric moved faster than anyone expected. Less than 48 hours after the truth about Caleb's past was uncovered, the kingdom woke to shocking news. Caleb Voss had been charged with treason. The accusation spread across Blackwind like wildfire. Markets buzzed with rumors. Nobles whispered in private chambers. Soldiers exchanged worried glances. By noon, nearly everyone had heard the story. The son of the former captain of the Royal Guard had secretly plotted against the crown. At least, that was the official version. The evidence appeared overwhelming. Anonymous witnesses, forged letters, financial records, secret meetings, everything carefully arranged. Everything perfectly timed. Everything false, but proving that would not be easy, because Lord Malric controlled half the council, and fear controlled the other half. Elara learned the news while helping organize medical supplies inside the palace infirmary. The moment she heard Caleb's name, her heart dropped. The crate slipped from her hands. Bottles shattered across the floor. She barely noticed. Only one thought mattered Caleb. She ran, ignoring servants, ignoring guards, ignoring protocol. By the time she reached the council hall, the hearing had already begun. The massive chamber overflowed with spectators. Nobles filled the upper galleries. Council members occupied their seats. Guards lined every wall, and at the center of it all stood Caleb, bound in silver restraints. The sight nearly broke her. For a moment, she saw not the ranger, not the accused traitor. She saw the 12-year-old boy standing between her and the world. The boy who promised to protect her. The boy who never stopped. Caleb! Her voice echoed through the hall. Every head turned. Her brother looked up. Despite everything, he smiled. A small smile. The same smile he used whenever she worried too much, that somehow hurt more than seeing him in chains. Lord Malric rose from his seat. The old nobleman looked completely composed, as though he were discussing trade agreements rather than destroying a man's life. The accused stands charged with conspiracy against the crown. His voice carried through the chamber. Evidence suggests he sought to destabilize the kingdom through hidden alliances and secret communications. Lie after lie, presented as fact. The crowd murmured. Fear spread easily, especially when wrapped in official language. Elara searched the room desperately, then found him. King Thorn, seated upon the elevated throne, silent watching. His expression revealed nothing, but Elara knew him now. She knew the signs. The king was furious, absolutely furious, and that frightened her almost as much as the trial itself. Because powerful men became dangerous when pushed too far, the proceedings continued. Witnesses appeared, one after another. Every story sounded convincing, every accusation carefully rehearsed, every detail designed to point toward guilt. Caleb remained silent. The king remained silent. Lord Malric grew increasingly confident. Then something unexpected happened. Victoria Ashfall stood. The chamber immediately quieted. The noblewoman rarely involved herself in public disputes. When she spoke, people listened. Permission to address the council. Malric frowned. The king nodded. Victoria stepped forward, graceful, confident, fearless. The evidence is impressive. The statement surprised everyone, including Malric. Then she continued. Too impressive. Confusion spread. Victoria looked directly at the council. The letters contain identical ink composition. Several nobles frowned. The witness statements use identical language patterns. More confusion. The financial records were produced within the same week despite supposedly originating years apart. The room grew silent, very silent. Because Victoria wasn't offering opinions. She was identifying flaws, real flaws, dangerous flaws. Lord Malric's confidence weakened slightly. For the first time all day, Victoria returned to her seat, her point made, her damage done. The trial paused briefly, not because Caleb was free. Far from it, but because doubt had entered the room. And doubt was difficult to remove. Hours later, after the council adjourned, Elara finally reached her brother. The holding cells beneath the palace were cold, dark, unforgiving. Caleb sat quietly behind iron bars. Yet somehow he appeared calmer than everyone else. Elara couldn't understand it. Why aren't you angry? The ranger smiled faintly. I am. You don't look angry. I'm tired. That answer hurt, because she understood it. The endless attacks, the constant threats, the uncertainty. It had exhausted him. The cell door opened behind her. King Thorn entered. The guards immediately retreated, leaving them alone. For several moments nobody spoke. Then the king produced a small wooden box. Ancient, weathered, locked. He placed it on the table. Caleb frowned. What is that? The king answered quietly. We found it beneath the floorboards of your parents' cottage. Silence. The ranger stared. His heartbeat quickened, because he recognized the carving. The symbol burned into the wood, a wolf and raven. Intertwined, his father's mark. The same mark he'd seen as a child. The same mark he had nearly forgotten. The king handed him a key. We believe your father hid it before he died. Slowly, Caleb unlocked the box. Inside lay several documents, old letters, military reports, a worn journal, and one sealed envelope. The room felt smaller, much smaller. The ranger opened the envelope first. The handwriting was unmistakable, his father's. For several seconds he couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Then he began reading. "My son, if you are reading this, then I have failed." The words hit like a hammer. Elara moved closer, tears already forming. Caleb continued, "I pray this letter never reaches you, but if it does, then the people who murdered our king are still searching for the truth." The room became completely silent. The letter continued. "I witnessed the poisoning. I learned the names responsible. I gathered proof. And I hid that proof where only my family could find it." The ranger's hands trembled. The next line changed everything. The man who ordered the murder was not the assassin. He was the man who benefited most from the king's death, Lord Malric Dustmore. The room froze, even the king, even Elara, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Because after years of suspicion, years of rumors, years of uncertainty, they finally had a name, a real name. A name written by a witness. A name backed by evidence. Caleb looked inside the box again. The remaining documents suddenly carried enormous weight. Proof. Actual proof, the thing Malric feared most. For a brief moment, hope returned. Hope that this nightmare might finally end. Then the cell door exploded open. General Rowan entered, his face pale, urgent, dangerously urgent. The king stood immediately. "What happened?" The general looked directly at Thorne. "The council has reached a decision." Silence. A terrible silence, because everyone understood. No decision made this quickly could be good. Rowan swallowed, then spoke the words that changed everything. "The execution has been approved." Elara's blood turned cold. Caleb closed his eyes. The king's jaw tightened. The general continued. "Sunrise, one word, one sentence, one deadline." Less than 12 hours remained. 12 hours before Caleb Voss would be publicly executed. 12 hours to prove the truth. 12 hours to save his life. And somewhere inside the palace, Lord Malric was already preparing for the morning, because he believed he had won. Part 7. The night before Caleb Voss was scheduled to die became the longest night of Elara's life. 12 hours. That was all they had. 12 hours to expose a conspiracy that had survived nearly 3 decades. 12 hours to stop the execution. 12 hours to save the man who had spent his entire life saving everyone else. The palace erupted into chaos. King Thorne immediately assembled his most trusted allies, General Rowan, Victoria Ashfall, Elder Lyra, every loyal member of the council, every person willing to stand against Lord Malric. The evidence from Caleb's father's box was spread across a massive table. Letters, witness accounts, financial records, military reports, enough to destroy powerful men, enough to expose murder, enough to save the kingdom. Unfortunately, not enough to stop the execution, because Malric had already secured a council majority. The sentence had been approved. The law was clear. The execution would proceed at sunrise, unless the king overruled the council entirely. And that option carried terrifying consequences. Civil war. Half the nobles would rebel. Half the military would split. Thousands could die. Lord Malric understood this. That was why he forced the situation. He wanted Thorne trapped, and the trap was working. Inside his cell, Caleb sat quietly. The distant sounds of preparation echoed through the stone corridors, soldiers marching, orders being shouted. The kingdom preparing for another day. A day he was not supposed to survive, yet strangely, he wasn't afraid. Not anymore. Because for the first time, he understood why all this had happened. It had never been about him. It had never been about treason. It had never even been about the mate bond. It was about silence. His father had died protecting the truth. Now others wanted Caleb dead for the same reason. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. The cell door opened. Elara entered, alone. The moment she saw him, tears filled her eyes. Caleb hated that. Not because she was crying, because she was trying not to. The effort hurt worse. She sat beside him. Neither spoke immediately. There were no perfect words, no magical solution. Just two siblings sharing what might be their final night together. Eventually, Elara broke. "I should have burned that contract sooner." Caleb blinked. "What?" A bitter laugh escaped her. "Everyone blames the contract." A pause. "So do I." Her voice cracked. "If I hadn't burned it." "No," the answer came instantly, firm, certain. Elara looked up. Caleb smiled softly. "For 20 years, you have blamed yourself for things that weren't your fault." A pause. "I'm not letting you start again now." The tears finally fell. Caleb reached forward. Just like he had when they were children. Just like he always did. "You chose love." Another pause. "There are worse reasons to change the world." Elara laughed through her tears, then hugged him, tightly, desperately. Neither wanted to let go. Hours passed. The sky slowly brightened, and eventually, sunrise arrived. The execution square overflowed with people. Thousands gathered. Nobles, merchants, soldiers, villagers. Every corner of Blackwind Kingdom seemed present. At the center stood the execution platform, high enough for everyone to see, high enough for everyone to remember. Caleb climbed the steps without resistance, without fear, without hesitation. The crowd watched silently. Many believed he was guilty. Many doubted. Most simply didn't know what to believe. Lord Malric stood near the front, calm, confident, victorious. Everything had unfolded exactly as planned, or so he thought. King Thorn arrived moments later. The crowd immediately parted. The ruler of Blackwind looked more dangerous than anyone had ever seen him. Not angry, not emotional. Something worse. Resolved, Elara stood beside him, pale, heartbroken, yet determined. The executioner stepped forward. The kingdom held its breath. Then Caleb spoke. "Before I die." His voice carried surprisingly far. The crowd quieted. Even Malric listened. The ranger smiled faintly. "My father once told me something." A pause. "He said evil survives because good people convince themselves someone else will stop it." The square became silent, completely silent. Caleb looked directly at Lord Malric. The nobleman's confidence weakened, only slightly, but enough. Then Caleb continued, "You spent 28 years hunting ghosts." The crowd murmured, confusion spread. Malric's face darkened. "You murdered a king." Shock exploded through the square. People gasped, others shouted. The accusation echoed across the city. And then General Rowan appeared, leading dozens of royal guards. Behind them came members of the council, including Victoria Ashfall, each carrying copies of the evidence. The letters, the reports, the confessions, the proof, all of it. The crowd watched in stunned silence as documents were distributed throughout the square. The truth spread faster than panic, faster than fear, faster than lies. Lord Malric finally understood. He wasn't winning, he was losing, publicly, completely. The old nobleman attempted to flee. He made 3 steps. General Rowan tackled him before he reached a horse. The crowd erupted. Everything collapsed. Decades of corruption. Decades of manipulation, decades of murder, destroyed in minutes. The kingdom finally knew the truth. And for one beautiful moment, Elara believed it was over. Then she saw Caleb. The ranger wasn't smiling anymore. A terrible realization settled inside her chest. Something was wrong, very wrong. The king noticed it too. He stepped toward the platform, Caleb. The ranger looked down at him, then toward Elara. His expression peaceful, too peaceful. The realization hit both of them simultaneously. Caleb had known this would happen, known this was the ending. The king moved forward. "What did you do?" Caleb smiled. The same smile, the one from childhood. The one that always appeared when he had already made a decision. "A kingdom this divided doesn't survive another fight." The crowd began quieting again, listening, watching. Caleb continued, "If I walk away today," a pause, "half the kingdom will call me a hero." Another pause, "The other half will call me a traitor." The realization spread, slowly, painfully, civil war. The kingdom stood one spark away from it, one rumor, one speech, one wrong decision, and thousands would die. Caleb looked toward Elara, then toward Thorn. "I spent my entire life protecting people." A faint smile appeared. "I'm not stopping now." The king understood. And for the first time in years, fear entered his eyes because Caleb had already chosen. There was no changing his mind, no saving him, no miracle coming. The ranger stepped toward the center of the platform, the entire kingdom watching, the entire kingdom listening. His final words were not directed at the crowd, not the council, not the nobles. They were directed at one man, King Thorn Blackwind. "I spent my life protecting her." Silence. The king's jaw tightened. Caleb's smile returned. "Now it's your turn." The execution proceeded. Not because the kingdom demanded it, not because justice demanded it, because Caleb demanded it. His death became the final sacrifice that united a broken kingdom, the final witness, the final victim, the final hero. Months later, Lord Malric and his allies were sentenced. The conspiracy was destroyed. The truth became history. Peace returned. And for the first time in decades, Blackwind Kingdom began healing. Years later, Queen Elara stood before a memorial overlooking the valley where she and Caleb had once played as children. The wind moved gently through the grass. The kingdom flourished, safe, united, free. King Thorn stood beside her, silent, respectful. The memorial was simple, exactly as Caleb would have wanted. No throne, no crown, no title, just a name. Caleb Voss, beloved brother, protector of the kingdom. Elara touched the stone, a small smile appearing through old tears. The kingdom remembered the queen who burned a mating contract. The kingdom remembered the king who chose love over politics. But Elara remembered something different. She remembered a 12-year-old boy standing before the world and making a promise he kept until his final breath. And long after kings and queens became legends, the brother who sacrificed everything remained unforgettable. The night before Caleb Voss was scheduled to die became the longest night of Elara's life. 12 hours, that was all they had. 12 hours to expose a conspiracy that had survived nearly 3 decades. 12 hours to stop the execution. 12 hours to save the man who had spent his entire life saving everyone else. The palace erupted into chaos. King Thorn immediately assembled his most trusted allies, General Rowan, Victoria Ashfall, Elder Lyra, every loyal member of the council, every person willing to stand against Lord Malric. The evidence from Caleb's father's box was spread across a massive table. Letters, witness accounts, financial records, military reports, enough to destroy powerful men, enough to expose murder, enough to save the kingdom. Unfortunately, not enough to stop the execution, because Malric had already secured a council majority. The sentence had been approved. The law was clear. The execution would proceed at sunrise, unless the king overruled the council entirely. And that option carried terrifying consequences. Civil war. Half the nobles would rebel, half the military would split, thousands could die. Lord Malric understood this. That was why he forced the situation. He wanted Thorn trapped, and the trap was working. Inside his cell, Caleb sat quietly. The distant sounds of preparation echoed through the stone corridors. Soldiers marching, orders being shouted. The kingdom preparing for another day. A day he was not supposed to survive, yet, strangely, he wasn't afraid, not anymore, because for the first time, he understood why all this had happened. It had never been about him. It had never been about treason. It had never even been about the mate bond. It was about silence. His father had died protecting the truth. Now others wanted Caleb dead for the same reason. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. The cell door opened. Elara entered, alone. The moment she saw him, tears filled her eyes. Caleb hated that, not because she was crying, because she was trying not to. The effort hurt worse. She sat beside him. Neither spoke immediately. There were no perfect words, no magical solution. Just two siblings sharing what might be their final night together. Eventually, Elara broke. I should have burned that contract sooner. Caleb blinked. What? A bitter laugh escaped her. Everyone blames the contract. A pause. So do I. Her voice cracked. If I hadn't burned it. No. The answer came instantly, firm, certain, absolute. Elara looked up. Caleb smiled softly. For 20 years you have blamed yourself for things that weren't your fault. A pause. I'm not letting you start again now. The tears finally fell. Caleb reached forward. Just like he had when they were children. Just like he always did. You chose love. Another pause. There are worse reasons to change the world. Elara laughed through her tears, then hugged him. Tightly. Desperately. Neither wanted to let go. Hours passed. The sky slowly brightened and eventually, sunrise arrived. The execution square overflowed with people. Thousands gathered. Nobles, merchants, soldiers, villagers. Every corner of Blackwind Kingdom seemed present. At the center stood the execution platform. High enough for everyone to see. High enough for everyone to remember. Caleb climbed the steps without resistance, without fear, without hesitation. The crowd watched silently. Many believed he was guilty, many doubted. Most simply didn't know what to believe. Lord Malric stood near the front. Calm, confident, victorious. Everything had unfolded exactly as planned, or so he thought. King Thorn arrived moments later. The crowd immediately parted. The ruler of Blackwind looked more dangerous than anyone had ever seen him. Not angry, not emotional, something worse. Resolved. Elara stood beside him, pale, heartbroken, yet determined. The executioner stepped forward. The kingdom held its breath. Then Caleb spoke. Before I die, his voice carried surprisingly far. The crowd quieted. Even Malric listened. The ranger smiled faintly. My father once told me something. A pause. He said evil survives because good people convince themselves someone else will stop it. The square became silent. Completely silent. Caleb looked directly at Lord Malric. The nobleman's confidence weakened. Only slightly, but enough. Then Caleb continued. You spent 28 years hunting ghosts. The crowd murmured. Confusion spread. Malric's face darkened. You murdered a king. Shock exploded through the square. People gasped, others shouted. The accusation echoed across the city. And then, General Rowan appeared, leading dozens of royal guards. Behind them came members of the council, including Victoria Ashfall, each carrying copies of the evidence, the letters, the reports, the confessions, the proof, all of it. The crowd watched in stunned silence as documents were distributed throughout the square. The truth spread faster than panic, faster than fear, faster than lies. Lord Malric finally understood. He wasn't winning, he was losing, publicly, completely. The old nobleman attempted to flee. He made 3 steps. General Rowan tackled him before he reached a horse. The crowd erupted. Everything collapsed. Decades of corruption. Decades of manipulation. Decades of murder. Destroyed in minutes. The kingdom finally knew the truth, and for one beautiful moment, Elara believed it was over. Then she saw Caleb. The ranger wasn't smiling anymore. A terrible realization settled inside her chest. Something was wrong, very wrong. The king noticed it too. He stepped toward the platform. Caleb. The ranger looked down at him, then toward Elara. His expression peaceful, too peaceful. The realization hit both of them simultaneously. Caleb had known this would happen. Known this was the ending. The king moved forward. What did you do? Caleb smiled, the same smile, the one from childhood. The one that always appeared when he had already made a decision. A kingdom this divided doesn't survive another fight. The crowd began quieting again, listening, watching. Caleb continued, "If I walk away today," a pause, "half the kingdom will call me a hero." Another pause, "The other half will call me a traitor." The realization spread, slowly, painfully, civil war. The kingdom stood one spark away from it, one rumor, one speech, one wrong decision, and thousands would die. Caleb looked toward Elara, then toward Thorn. "I spent my entire life protecting people." A faint smile appeared. "I'm not stopping now." The king understood. And for the first time in years, fear entered his eyes. Because Caleb had already chosen, there was no changing his mind, no saving him. No miracle coming. The ranger stepped toward the center of the platform, the entire kingdom watching, the entire kingdom listening. His final words were not directed at the crowd, not the council, not the nobles. They were directed at one man, King Thorn Blackwind. "I spent my life protecting her." Silence. The king's jaw tightened. Caleb's smile returned. "Now it's your turn." The execution proceeded. Not because the kingdom demanded it, not because justice demanded it, because Caleb demanded it. His death became the final sacrifice that united a broken kingdom, the final witness, the final victim, the final hero. Months later, Lord Malric and his allies were sentenced. The conspiracy was destroyed. The truth became history. Peace returned. And for the first time in decades, Blackwind Kingdom began healing. Years later, Queen Elara stood before a memorial overlooking the valley where she and Caleb had once played as children. The wind moved gently through the grass. The kingdom below flourished, safe, united, free. King Thorn stood beside her, silent, respectful. The memorial was simple, exactly as Caleb would have wanted. No throne, no crown, no title, just a name. Caleb Voss, beloved brother, protector of the kingdom. Elara touched the stone, a small smile appearing through old tears. The kingdom remembered the queen, who burned a mating contract. The kingdom remembered the king, who chose love over politics. But Elara remembered something different. She remembered a 12-year-old boy standing before the world and making a promise. A promise he kept until his final breath, and long after kings and queens became legends. The brother who sacrificed everything remained unforgettable.